Welcome to episode 706 of Salsido Paranormal. I'm your host, James Salsido, here with my co-host, Jen, the Arcane Observer, and tonight we will be talking about roads. This is part 2 of our discussion on this topic. So, Jen, welcome back to the show, as always. Thank you for being here.
Yep, happy to be here. Thank you.
So we kind of left off starting to talk about crossroads. I did find an article, but I'd be happy to hear what you've heard about that whole concept as well.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that because you're moving towards a particular destination, and so you have the road in front of you, the path you're going to go to in front of you, and then the road behind you where you've come from. And then when you come to a crossroads, you can see the options of the present. So the two roads going in either direction are sort of like a choice you could make. And then the road ahead of you, just going straight forward, is where you were going. But then when you come to a point, so this happens in life, a lot of times you have a point of where you want to go, and then something happens, and you're at sort of an intersection of life, deciding which way you're going to go. And so it's a particular location that people encountered or have in the past found it to be a location, and that they sometimes will even like I've heard of objects that have been causing a person a problem. Like, say they have an object that their minds, maybe they think that it's, and this is just the folklore with it, the superstition of it, but if the object has been causing them some kind of trouble, they'll tell you to take it to a crossroads and to leave it there, or to like bury it near a crossroads, and that objects that are found by a crossroads are held in kind of like a sort of suspicious, quizzical way, because it's at a conjecture in your life or in the time that you're going through where it should take more consideration, or it's a place to leave things that have caused some kind of consternation of some kind because of the past is behind. It's like the three-faced God concept, even the many-faced, the many options of how you could go, knowing what's behind you, not knowing what's in front of you. So if you don't want to go forward into an unknown, halfway there is a sort of choice. At some point, there's a choice to go another direction, and that could lead you on another path, or that sort of thing. That's what I've heard about it.
Yeah, the the most recent example I've heard of that, and I don't know, I think it's really famous now, like in the musical community, is and I don't know the details of it, but I've heard of a blues musician, guitarist, and I can't remember his name now. I have to look it up. But who supposedly went and to a crossroads to make a deal with, I believe it was the devil, but some entity, to become the best blues guitarist out there. And people said that because after a certain point, he went from just being mediocre to not so good to just being apparently the best at that time. And but then he would turn away on the stage so that no one could see what he was playing, so that no one would know how to do what he could do. Of course, I mean that's a one example, but I'm sure there's probably plenty of others in time of just weird things happening and people changing possibly before and then after they went to one of these mysterious locations. So that's a wild concept as well.
That's neat. I mean, I've heard about too, and I've heard of that. I can't remember either. But there's also this whole concept of, I've heard about not wanting to pick a house. Like, for example, if you're going, think about like a T shape. Like, say you're on a road, and the intersection is kind of like a T, If your house is at the end of that T at the top of it, basically, so if somebody's driving in a car and they're going down that road and they can go left or right, but what's in front of them is your house, that's a
Okay.
bad location to have your house. Because like the energy is like flowing in that direction. Now, commonly you would think like, well, because somebody could be like driving haphazardly and possibly drive into your home or something of the kind. There's also the notion that the energy coming from that road is going forward. It's still going forward before they take a left or right. And if your house is in the path of that energy, it could cause some type of maybe minor chaos of some kind. So that's interesting too, but there's some kind of a flow of energy going that direction. And right before they decide to go left or right, the energy was going forward. Taking a crossroads, or the idea of making the deal with the devil at a crossroads, is the concept that you're going forward, you have a destination, but something tells you there's a way to get to that destination if you take a left or right. So it's like this choice made in between. Like maybe the road is longer going this way. You could decide to go left or right, and maybe one of those directions seems to be a shortcut or something of the kind. It can get you to, but it may be a deviation from where you were trying to get to begin with, and you don't know. So you're taking kind of a risk at a crossroads. If you're trying to get somewhere and you don't know how to get there.
Right, and I did find the person I was thinking of, Robert Johnson is his name, and of course I knew it once I saw it because I'd heard it before. It'd just been a little while, but yeah. So he went to this crossroads area and asked for the ability to just be the best musician, basically, and somehow it worked, but of course he lost his soul when he did that. But in exchange, he was able to, make be the best guitarist that was around at the time. So I have an article here. I'll also include this in the episode description. But yeah, the placement of buildings and things like that on roads too. I think that's also part of it. And we mentioned in the first episode the idea of accidents, not even necessarily at crossroads, but just any area that has had a lot of accidents will start to get this weird reputation about it, and people thinking about it and knowing about it. And then of course that's just, I wonder about that if in places where maybe things weren't planned so well,
Mhm.
architecturally, what city planning, road planning, whatever you want to call it, then yeah, that could make sense that there could be things that happen once or twice if the circumstances are right, which is not really, by that I guess I mean wrong, then it could continue to happen over and over again in these places. So um,
Right.
yeah, that is wild that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen roads like nearby where I work. I was sitting outside on a break, and I noticed that the traffic coming off of one road, there was a stop sign on the side roads, but not on the main road. So the cars were just flying through there. And as cars were trying to come off of it wasn't a four-way stop, it was just a two-way stop. As they were trying to come through to drive through, there'd be like occasional honking and people being frustrated about allowing another car to come in between that because they expected to have just a freeway go. And so it was a spot for accidents, in my opinion. But like you're talking about with, a sort of by planning wise, and it reminds me of the bridges conversation, like the bridge that was behind my house. There were people lost their lives, 3 people while I was living there. Well, 2
Right.
people before I moved there, and then 1 after that, because of indecent construction of how it was designed. And by that means, do you wonder, like was it because of that particular moment of how it was constructed, or was there something already going on there before that kind of sort of damned the scenario to make it more predisposed to accidents of a kind. So I think with traffic in particular, where people are traveling at very high speeds with a lot of momentum, and they have a destination in mind of where they are going, and that anything that should interrupt that or intercept that could that cause, I don't know, a type of energy buildup of some kind. But then in
Right.
addition to that, like whatever it was before, had that was that a spot that had some type of continuous cycle of that? I think it could be. I think it could be like that. In the crossroads spirit concept, there's, I think it's not just symbolic. It's, if you don't know where you're going, but you know where you're trying to get to, and then something offers you a way to get to what you think you want, or maybe it's just the sort of illusion. It's not necessarily what you wanted, but
Right.
it's what you think it looks like, and it gives you a way to get to that, and so it leads you astray. And the fact that he was saying, feeling like you lost your soul, it's sort of like I abandoned that at those crossroads because I knew where I was trying to go, but then I went after what I thought I was looking for, and it wasn't what I expected it to be. So, like, if he said that he lost his soul, I think it's almost like that. But he lost it at the crossroads.
Right. Yeah. I think that is. I'm not sure if he said it exactly, but I know it's part of the legend. Is that was the exchange that was agreed upon. Um, Also, and then yeah, Ricky in the chat here talks about other places, not necessarily roads, but the forest um, in Japan, I believe it is. Yeah, um, where that is known for having being a place where people would take their lives just on massive numbers, and that has just gotten so bad that I've heard about this. There's signs that are left all around the forest, sort of urging people not to do it and to just stay away from that area because of it. Um, that's something I think we need to cover forest at some point too. But but yeah, the other thing about roads I want to just talk about for a little while is the other weird thing I've heard and read about, where people will see vehicles that will appear and or disappear on roads,
Right.
and or sometimes they'll see vehicles going down the road, but they won't see anyone in the vehicle. I've heard that as well. Even some places I've heard where people see vehicles that look almost like they're transparent, almost like a ghost, which in a way doesn't make sense because that's not a living physical creature. But there's still so many reports of that where you can't just write it off as nonsense because there's just too many reports about that. I'm curious to know what you think about all that as well.
Well, like, it reminds me of the movie or the story of Christine, like with Stephen King, of the vehicle that had consciousness to it. It's really,
Yes, yeah,
and
yeah,
like with these cars people are talking about, I've seen it on like traffic cams where there is no vehicle there, and then suddenly there is a vehicle there that's driving along the road. Like, it seems to appear out of nowhere at all. So I don't know what to make of that. I mean, is it a vehicle that maybe was in an accident? I wonder that. Of course, you're going to wonder if the road's just haunted with,
right,
maybe that car, 5 minutes from then at some other time period wasn't involved in a car accident, but you're seeing the relay as like a haunted highway. So maybe that
yeah.
scenario of some kind.
I do think residual hauntings like that, these repeats of energy fields that repeat like tapes, are possible, just about everywhere, and so I think that can account for some of them as well. But there's and maybe that does account too for the ones that look solid but they just appear and then vanish. That could be as well. But yeah, it is wild. Looking at the chat here, Ricky says there are some creepy places and just strange energy. We don't know what happened at these places over history, like battles and what could have happened, and we wouldn't know. And that's true. I mean, it's the further back in history you go, the less record of that there's going to be that we can just easily find and look up. So, yeah, but I've heard so many accounts of vehicle like regular cars, but also in some cases had a story I found a little while ago now, of a someone that saw a semi truck that had been involved in an accident. Um, there were reports of in this one town they had to go through of this truck appearing and going after other vehicles at night and then
Oh,
just vanishing. And that to me is I've never heard of that before, and to that extreme until that one entry I found online. But it was so bad that I mean, it was known to the area. But then the person that wrote the post had the experience of seeing this vehicle that they had heard of in legends, but not really thought was real, and being sort of chased by it seemed like, and to the point where they decided never to go through this one little town ever again at night because of it. So really, it is really wild how that kind of stuff. I mean, that's not just a tiny little car. That's a huge object to be vanishing and reappearing, and that I have to wonder if that's just something else taking on that form to
right.
pass off as that. Maybe not exactly even being that, but I don't know. So, but yeah, that's why I wanted to bring that up with you as well.
Well, like Maximum Overdrive. We were talking about Christine, and they have Maximum Overdrive. The concept. It's an old movie too, talking about vehicles having some type of mind of their own, but like in the concept of a semi chasing people that's not occupied, but it's like a being used as a sort of tool or some kind. That is scary. But and you have the idea too, though, that I think that when people are in this kind of when they're in between places, when they are traveling in any state, any kind of shape or form, whether that's by sea or by land or by air, there's a vulnerability to it. The same thing we were talking about with the bridges. And then there's a weird thing about like the idea of a car coming out of nowhere or a person coming out of nowhere. Like, for example, in the previous show when I was talking about my experience when I was just making that delivery and then encountered that shadow, looked like just a shadow moving across the road. If anyone had swerved or moved from how they were on their own trajectory, it could have resulted in a terrible accident.
Yeah,
So it's
definitely.
almost like it's like it's enacting this possibility of either what had happened before that, or like what if people had reacted to that and had swerved out of the way of it, it would have caused an accident. And so leading more to building up of whatever kind of energy was already there present, perhaps, or what energy might have been present there. And the same thing with the bridge scenario, that it was as if one death led to another. Like it seemed to kind of build upon that because it was an accident prone area. And so, like, in these areas that are particularly dangerous, whether there are ridges or curving roads or, they have Dead Man's Curve and these kind of concepts, and then crossroads where you have vehicles coming from different directions, things like that. But the energy moving so swiftly, putting people off balance, or then to be topped out with manifestations of the concept of the semi. Everyone knows to be terrified of a semi when you're driving
Right.
by in a vehicle because of the sheer force and what it could possibly do. There's a great deal of respect in it. It's basically a train on the road, on the highway. So it's really strange, though, to hear about people reporting being chased, or at least were they being pursued by the semi? Is that kind of concept, or
Right. Yeah, that seems to be the idea, and of course, I wonder too with that when people are they think they're being chased by whatever they're seeing. is it what is the reason for the chasing? Sometimes I wonder with some of these encounters, is it meant to be a negative thing, or is it like, hey, wait, I don't know what's going on here. You see me, stop. Like, what's going on here? Maybe whoever's out there that's
Mm-hmm.
manifesting in this way is possibly just as confused or frightened about whatever is going on as the person that they appear to be going after. In some cases, I wonder about that as well.
Could be.
Ricky in the chat says logging truck is also is a scary one. I've heard of that too. When it comes to logs and everything, and but I don't know. The other thing too with roads is, especially the ones that are near water, near creeks or any kind of waterway where there's a flood. I've heard of roads being basically covered in water too, and I wonder how that. I think we need to do a show on waterways at some point as well, and all the
Mm-hmm.
weirdness that can go with that, because that's another connecting point to all this. As we've already kind of discussed with bridges, but then also just water coming over roads, going over roads when it's not supposed to, or having a road near water.
Yeah.
Again, it can lead to help that whole hypnotic effect of when you're driving, you're seeing this possibly beautiful lake or whatever, or creek or river nearby, and you're getting into a certain state of mind, and then whatever's out there maybe can communicate better when you're in that state. I think that's the case anyway when you're either going to sleep or coming out of sleep, that kind of thing. And then also the other thing I wanted to mention too was there are so many accounts of figures just coming out of nowhere out on the side of the road and going in front of vehicles and then vanishing.
That's what happened with mine. That's what happened with
Yeah,
mine. Yeah.
that's the wow. And then sometimes they're shadows, other times they're full on figures, ladies and women in white, like you said, and just other randomness too with that. So, roads definitely seem to have a lot going on there. I do wonder if just everywhere does. It's just that we don't always hear about it, or there's no easy way to correlate it. If there's just weirdness going on at random all over the place in every kind of surrounding you want to be in, but then you just don't hear about it because you're not. If it's not your home, then you're not there all the time, or if it's not your workplace. I wonder how much of this stuff just does happen everywhere. But it's good to focus on these area types as well.
It appears to be everywhere. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, whether you're in an airplane or on a road, and these particular locations, I mean, it's any location. It's really
right.
strange. But then they have kind of a typography of how it's acting in those locations. For example, on roads, it's not the same kind of haunting as a house that's being haunted, but there's an interaction that seems to be occurring. It's really weird. So whether, say you have like a haunted airplane or a haunted train or a haunted car, or a haunted road or a
Right.
haunted house, they are different types of hauntings because and it shows you a variety of the way that the other side or whatever it is interacting with the perceiver, the person who is seeing or experiencing it
Yeah,
due to the
definitely.
location.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
No,
the different circumstances there.
yep.
I think we should also. I'll have to end it here, but I think we should also do a show on haunted vehicles because I've heard a lot about that as well, or just weird things about vehicles. But thank you as always for being on the show with me, Jen, and we'll do this again next time.
Thank you so much, James. Have a good night.
You as well, and thank you all for listening. And I will talk to you next time on Salsido Paranormal. Take care.